But now we continue our debate between Stuart Baker, former NSA General Counsel. He was appointed to the NSA by President George H.W. Bush and then served appointed by President George W. Bush to the Department of Homeland Security. We're also joined by Daniel Ellsberg, former Pentagon and RAND Corporation analyst who leaked the Pentagon Papers in 1971, exposing the secret history of the U.S. involvement in Vietnam. Dan Ellsberg, Stuart Baker says he was not, in response to Juan's question, surprised by what was exposed by Edward Snowden. And I also want to make just one point on the issue of Snowden continuing to release information. According to Edward Snowden, he gave the documents, we believe it's about 1.7 million documents, to the journalists, Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras. He says when he went to Russia, he didn't have the documents, and he is not the one who is continuing to release them. But the journalists who have access to them are one by one writing stories in various papers, delving into what is in these documents. Dan Ellsberg.
Okay, a couple things there, Amy. First of all, the 1.7 million figure, which obviously is far more than he could possibly have looked at, let alone read, is a government statement. They don't know what he released to the journalists. Neither Mr. Baker nor I actually know, but I am informed that it was first Snowden has said that it's wrong by at least an order of magnitude, tenfold, which is
which
another
way?
Which way? Yes, very good. That he released less than 10% of what they're talking about, and that everything he did release to the journalists was something that he had looked at and formed a judgment that they ought to have it. But he didn't want them to rely on his judgment alone. He could have put them all on the web by himself, very much, or sequentially. On the contrary, he said over and over, I am not releasing a single document, which he has not. He said every document should have the judgment of a staff of trained journalists to use their judgment on that. Second, in every case of every story that has appeared so far, and apparently Mr. Baker believes that there has been great damage from those already, for which the journalists would be also responsible, every story has been checked with NSA by both The Guardian and by The Washington Post. In every case, they have made objections. Not all of the objections have been followed by the newspapers, but in almost every case that they've printed, they have followed objections as to sources and methods that would actually damage the United States or our interests. As Snowden has said, he had access, he had knowledge of the clandestine whereabouts of NSA listening posts all over the world, had neither copied those nor given them to journalists, which he could have, because that would harm our intelligence apparatus, which he believes in and which I believe in. Of course there must be intelligence, and of course there must be secrecy about it. So he's made that judgment. I understand that Glenn Greenwald, for example, has demanded an agreement from every newspaper source to which he's given documents that they check their stories with NSA for sensitive material. Now, when Mr. Clapper, when Mr.
Baker. Stuart Baker.
When Mr. Baker says that there, over and over, that there has been great damage here, I ask him, how does he know that? Based on what? Now, possibly he still is reading classified material as a consultant or somewhat, and maybe not. If not, he has, I wonder what his basis is. My guess is he's accepting at face value the statements of Mr. Clapper or of others. Why would you do that? There's no basis for that. I have two questions. For Mr. Baker, actually, which are both susceptible of yes or no answers. They're very short, and I hope he will not filibuster. One, let me say one thing by background to give him credit, if I may. He was General Counsel of NSA in the 90s. Before 9/11, when, according to Kirk Wiebe and others, the NSA was observing what they called the first commandment. Thou shalt not spy on Americans, thou shalt not listen to Americans or collect their material without an individualized court order with probable cause, and that they observed that. Wiebe has said that for some 20 years of their 70 years in existence, they were within the law and the Constitution, not earlier under Johnson or Nixon, and not later. So the two questions are, but he may have, Mr. Baker may have an idealized picture of how the system works from having experienced it before 9/11. Here's the two questions. One, if he had been general counsel to Mr. Clapper when he faced Congress and told them, was asked, are we collecting any data at all on millions of Americans, would he have encouraged Mr. Clapper to give, as a counsel, the answer that he did give, no, which Clapper later explained after Snowden's disclosure was, quote, the least untruthful answer he could have given? Or would he have advised him otherwise, perhaps to go into closed session or something? And the second is, if he had been general counsel of the NSA in 2001 to 2006, during which there was no legal basis for criminal, unconstitutional, warrantless killing, what would his judgment have been? And if it had been not to do that and had been overridden, would he have simply accepted that, like his colleagues, or might he have considered telling someone other than the intelligence committees?
Stuart Baker, those are two questions for you. Why don't you begin with the first?
So I don't want to be accused of filibustering, but some of these answers do require a little bit more context. I think everyone would agree that Clapper's answer to that question was not the right thing to say. That said, it was a question designed quite specifically to result in the compromise of the 215 program. That is to say, there was nobody asking the question, nobody answering the question who didn't already know the answer to that question. What they could not do is tell Al-Qaeda or the American people about it without telling Al-Qaeda. What he should have said is something that dodged the question, but it was cleverly designed by Senator Wyden so that, having asked a question, are you collecting information on millions of Americans, to say, I can only answer that in classified session, answers the question as well. So it was. So
what would he have? What would you have advised?
Where he could not neither answer or refuse to answer without exposing the program. So he came up with a compromise that was trying to, I think, interpret the notion of collection as, are you spying on Americans, which he felt he could comfortably say we are not, except where we have court orders or where we've inadvertently collected the information. That was, I think when you read the transcript, it's hard to see that as a responsive answer, and he didn't even gracefully do that. But I think it's fair to point out that this was not some campaign of lying. This was a campaign of exposure by Senator Wyden and a maladroit effort to avoid that question. So that's point one. Point two, the question of the 2006 warrantless wiretapping. I certainly agree with Mr. Ellsberg that it's very hard to square that with the statute, with FISA. The direction was given and the legal conclusion was reached that the president had the authority to order that, notwithstanding FISA. And there have been, there's a longstanding view that the president does have authority to do this without the involvement of the courts. In fact, it was the majority view, at least until 1978. But I think the passage of the FISA Act made that much harder to do. That said, the FISA court at that point had utterly disgraced itself. It had forced a bunch of what it turns out are illegal requirements in the name of civil liberties on the FBI and the intelligence community that helped in a very significant way to make it difficult to respond to the news that there were hijackers or there were terrorists in the United States before 9/11. Had it not been for the FISA court's wrong and extra legal policies, it's quite possible that the hijackers would have been caught. And after 9/11, after it became clear that this was part of the problem, the FISA court insisted on those illegal policies and forced the government to take its first appeal ever to the FISA review court. That suggested that the FISA court was not actually interested in protecting Americans, but had a goal goal that no one else in government shared, which was to maintain this wall between intelligence and law enforcement.
That's
so I kind of
absolutely
understand why they
mistaken.
did it, but I have to say that as a lawyer, it's hard to justify.
Mr. Baker, we just have about a minute left. You had the first word. We'll have Dan Ellsberg respond.
I haven't called Mr. Baker a liar. I certainly don't regard him as anything other than patriotic, and I don't think it's his intent to deceive. But what he's just said is give an example that actually demonstrates the opposite of what he just said. He's referring to the case of Khalid al-Mihdhar. I would like to assume that he knew, but on the other hand, perhaps
You
he's
have
just
30
ignorant
seconds,
of
Dan.
the fact that al-Mihdhar was known in this country, the hijacker went into the Pentagon, was known by NSA, pre-9/11 intelligence methods to the CIA. Their choice, deliberate not to give it to the FBI, had nothing to do with firewalls. I can't believe you don't know that. I'm sorry, Mr. Baker. And the fact is, it was not a fault of FISA. You're joining me here in criticizing the FISA court. That's ridiculous.
2001, there was an effort.
We're going to have to leave it there because we are out of time. Stuart Baker, former NSA General Counsel, as well as worked at the Department of Homeland Security, and Dan Ellsberg, perhaps the country's most famous whistleblower, leaked the Pentagon Papers to the New York Times in 1971, exposing the secret history of the U.S. involvement in Vietnam. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gun.